guest, Chief Jason Parrott, the Lincolnwood Police Department, is going to be our honored guest, and I'm really happy that everybody is here. Um, I would like to make a couple of announcements before we get straight in. Lincolnwood Together has been working really hard to create two committees. One will be our outreach committee, where we are looking to spread the word and let people know that we exist and to welcome people to work with us. And so we're forming a committee of people who will help with outreach. We also have been forming a program committee. We're very interested in doing some curriculum and doing some coordinated efforts where we have a series of programs like we're having tonight. We want to get a schedule going, and we have some ideas about content. We're very especially interested in communication. So if you're interested in joining either one of those committees, we ask you to please indicate that. You can send an email to lincolnwoodtogether@gmail.com, and I will put you in touch. Either Louise Gross is here tonight. We can put you in touch with her. She's heading up the program committee, or with Syed, and he is coordinating the outreach committee right now. Also, if you're here tonight and you did not receive an email inviting you, please put your email in the chat. You can direct that directly to me or to Paula Tobin, who's co-hosting tonight. And if you want to, don't want to put it out there for the whole world to see, and I will be happy to do that, or you can just write it in there. Or you can send an email to lincolnwoodtogether@gmail.com so that we can add you. One of the things that's really nice about doing a Zoom call are the reactions. And if you are on the computer and you look at the lower right-hand side of your screen, it says reactions. And I just want to suggest, if you look there, I'm going to put it on my screen right now. There's one that looks like hands clapping. If at some point you want to say something and somebody else is talking, please use that. And if when we see your hand up, we'll call on you, okay? Paula just put a heart on hers. When Chief Parrott says things that you just love, give him a heart. It'll be really cool. And we can give him thumbs up, and we can have all kinds of reactions. And it makes the whole, there you go, Michelle and Marcus. I get that's probably Marcus. Yeah, I figured that out. So that you can, give the reactions and we can have direct responses. That's pretty cool. Please use the chat if you have any questions or you want us to say something and you don't feel like talking in the group. Some people prefer not to. You can always ask the question in the chat, and then I will direct it to Chief Parrott. And last but certainly not least, any of you who have been to a Lincolnwood Together meeting know that we normally pass the hat because we have a subsidiary, which is the Harris Levitt Memorial Angel Fund. Paula is here tonight. She's the president of the fund, and she would undoubtedly be passing around the big pretzel jar that she decorated so that we could all throw a couple of bucks in there. We can't do that virtually, but she did put the link in the chat, and we would be more than grateful for anybody who can make a donation. It's tax deductible, and it's neighbors helping neighbors. And we're really proud, especially in this weather and with what's been going on, when we hear from the police department that there are needs to be able to supply food cards, to be able to pay for somebody's utilities, people who are in a crisis. So please chip in. And I think that's everything. Without further ado, I think Chief Parrott, you said that you're gonna make a few introductory remarks, and then we want to open it up for questions and answers. Some of our suggested topics tonight were about safety, carjacking, COVID testing, the vaccines, diversity in the police department. Even though right now we're without a social worker, to hear a little bit about what the social worker does in Lincolnwood when we've got one. And also there was all this curiosity, Chief, about what is a community service officer? You had a chance to explain a little bit to me the other day, but I think there's some questions in the group. And then whatever else is appropriate for Chief Parrott to talk to us about. So I'm going to step back into a role of moderator and hand it over to Chief Parrott. Welcome, and thanks for being here.
Well, thanks, Karen. And I just want to say hello to everybody. For those, I feel like I know mostly everybody or I've met most of everybody that's on this virtual meeting. So welcome. I hope, it's a new year, and I know it's been a while since we've had a virtual meeting from the last time. but we're still dealing with challenging times from many perspectives. But I wish everybody a happy new year. I hope people are experiencing a better 2021 than 2020. I know that's it's been a challenge for a lot of people. It's been a challenge for the police department and the purposes of dealing with COVID, and obviously dealing with a lot of different things that have evolved since the last time we talked, and good things, but we obviously have a challenging time in many different ways. I think 2020 has been a year that we're trying to move past and make 2021 better. It's been a slow rollout. I know you touched upon vaccines. I think there's a lot of people still trying to get vaccines, and that's a challenge. But I encourage those that are feel that they want to get a vaccine, be aggressive and try to get that vaccine. I think I'm a true believer in that. I think it's good, and I think it'll help prevent further problems down the road with COVID. I think from everything I've seen, it seems like COVID potentially is going to be around for a little bit longer than we'd like it to be. But I'm here, as I said, I kind of want to keep it in an open question and answer from, talking to you just really as somebody that I myself is, I love Lincolnwood, and Lincolnwood's a great community, and I've been here now coming up on 3 years as the chief, and I could tell you that my transition from coming to Evanston to Lincolnwood has been nothing but great, and getting to know everybody in this community. I feel fortunate for those that are on this call that haven't met and talked to me. I grew up, as a kid in Rogers Park, and I've been fortunate to spend the vast majority of my law enforcement career, which is now over 30 years, the vast majority surrounded around where I grew up. I spent 26 years in Evanston, and now 3 here, and a couple in an agency that was in DuPage County. But the vast majority of my time has been here, and it's been great being close to where I grew up, and also being around people that have a relationship either not only to Lincolnwood and Evanston, but also where I grew up in Rogers Park. So it means a lot to me, and also means a lot to be available to answer residents' questions, concerns, comments, and try to help people. I mean, every police officer I've ever met, even from when I became a police officer, we took this job to help people. And I think that's something that I wake up every day and know that that's my first and foremost mission, is to help people. And it could be helping people with just advice, or physically helping people if we need to. So I feel that, we need to be available to the public and keep that open line of communication for everybody, not only just myself, but officers that are working the street. You need to know the officers that are working in your neighborhood. It just aligns for better police community relations, which I'm sure everybody knows that's a topic, and it's been a topic for years, many years for police, some positive, some negative. We're always trying to make improvements, but we always seem to accomplish more with people we know or have a relationship with than with somebody we don't. So that's kind of the key to keeping the lines of communication open, that we could just get to know each other. And sometimes people may not be happy with the answer they get, but we try to make them happy, but we'll figure it out. Like I said, there's always problem solving is always sometimes it just takes interesting roads, but we try to get there to make an accommodation for all, a safe one and a legal one, and just make communities better to live in. So with that being said, I know one of the first topics listed on the informational was community safety, carjackings. One thing I'd like to mention is that, the police department has pushed out a lot of information, safety information, reminders via our social media account, our Twitter, our Facebook. We also have a police messaging board for those that have had to drive down recently Lincoln Avenue, whether it's during the snow or before the snow. We have our police messaging board out, reminding people to, don't exceed the speed limit, drive safely, call if you see something suspicious so we can investigate, and also please wear your mask to help prevent the spread of COVID. So we can only get so many messages out at one time, but those are the 3 most important ones we felt were key to the community. We know that there's been one thing with Lincolnwood is if something major does happen, word does travel fast. We've had instances where there's accurate information, and sometimes when inaccurate information gets out, and we want to get accurate information out. We want to get it out timely, but we also want to make sure we get the right information out. And for those that are concerned about carjackings, the village has had one in the last year and a half, which I think is, if you look at, now I don't want any carjackings here at all to happen, but for those that may be familiar, there was an armed carjacking that happened. It happened to a family in a residential neighborhood in Lincolnwood. I could tell you that fortunately that the vehicle was recovered, and we didn't locate the offenders, unfortunately. But that being said, nobody was hurt physically, which is something that I look at as a very important measurement. But that being said, I also look at what's going on with carjackings, and as you know, the city of Chicago has had an astronomical amount of carjackings that have occurred, that have increasingly occurred between 2019 to 2020, and 2021 kind of started out pretty elevated. I think the weather has curtailed a little bit of that between the snow and the heavy cold. My hopes are that with some of the law enforcement efforts, collaborative efforts between a lot of different police departments, that will start to drop. We also have federal partners that have engaged on these carjackings that are occurring, not just in the city of Chicago, but in the Chicago metropolitan area. I think now that there's some federal attention on getting people charged federally for committing carjackings, if they're eligible, my hopes are that that is a tactic that will discourage people from doing criminal activity, especially violent criminal activity. Lincolnwood is obviously surrounded on, several ends by the city, but also other suburbs. Those other suburbs, I can't speak to specifics, but I can tell you that every suburb in the Chicagoland area, especially the ones closer to Chicago, have felt the impact of carjackings. But not just carjackings, but other incidents have occurred. We have to deal with auto theft or theft of packages. And some of those may be able to be stopped by just taking precautionary measures. And those precautionary measures are, most importantly, your neighborhood and who belongs more than anybody. You know who belongs driving down your street and who doesn't. And if you see something suspicious, call the police and let us investigate. That doesn't mean somebody's committing a crime, but it may mean that, they may be committing a crime, or they may be about to commit a crime. So having, neighbors that are willing to communicate with each other and just keep being on the lookout. And I say this because now more than ever, there's a lot of people still working from home with COVID, working virtually. So you're home. If you're home, what a better time to keep an eye out for the neighborhood, especially people that are suspicious. So I think that's a good thing. So if you, again, let us come and investigate. That's what we're here for. And it's most often it turns out to be nothing, but if it's something, at least we can hopefully interrupt a crime or find out if we stop the person before they commit a crime. They won't be arrested. They may be detained for a short moment. We can get them identified. And I can tell you that in my experience of being a police officer for many, many years, if we stop somebody and identify them, and they were about to commit a crime, they maybe didn't get past that threshold, they will think twice about coming into that neighborhood because they know that the neighbors called the police on them. Because we'll tell them, we're like, hey, officer, why are you stopping me? Well, there was a resident over here that called and described you as being suspicious. We don't give that name of that resident, but we do tell them that somebody called. And so they know that somebody saw them doing something that looked out of the ordinary. So those are just things and steps that we look to partnership with, residents to make those calls so we can investigate further. Lincolnwood's been very fortunate to, it's a safe community. We're very fortunate. I can tell you that our numbers starting out this year are great. I hope they stay that way. Our increases in crime last year were related to theft, mostly retail theft. Sometimes I think some of the issues that we had last year in 2020 after the shutdown were people stealing catalytic converters. And because of a lot of people not going out and shopping, I'm sure everybody's fairly aware of the Amazon delivery man Amazon deliveries have skyrocketed, and we attribute a lot of our thefts to package thefts. So some of them have been prevented through use of cameras or calling police in a timely fashion where we've been able to investigate them, but they still occurred. And with the more package deliveries, there were some, unfortunately, more package thefts. But that was our violent crime rate did not go up at all. We maintained a very good violent crime rate within the village. As I said, very safe. Those numbers are very good. And officers are, they're not only patrolling the main arteries of the village, but they're going down the side streets. And another reason why, and I'll just mention this as a side because we've had so much snow over the last couple of days, an excessive amount of snow, that we have been kind of pushing for people to make sure that they get their cars dug out, get them cleaned. We don't want to write tickets for that. But we want those streets so the plows can come down and clean them. So if we do have to patrol and drive the side streets and respond to an emergency along with the fire department, that we can get there in a timely fashion. The one good news is most of our police vehicles, not all, but just about most of them, nowadays we have all-wheel drive. So that does help us get to where we need to get to in a timely fashion, more so than years ago when we just didn't have the ability to have those kind of vehicles available to us. So I'm really kind of open to questions on safety before I get into the next topic, but I really want to, hear what the public wants to ask about. Lori, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi. Hi, thanks for being here this evening.
Of course.
Very happy to see you again. So my question actually is about the snow removal and cars parked on the wrong side of the street. And I was just talking to my sister this afternoon, she lives in Elmhurst. Not only are they, theirs is much more strict. They are not allowed to park on the street at all when there's a certain amount of snow. And I'm feeling rather frustrated, and I'm on a wider street. I'm not even on one of the really narrower streets in Lincolnwood, with neighbors who choose not to use their garage, or in one instance, they don't have a garage, but yet they're not parking on the appropriate side of the street. And I'm feeling really frustrated. So my mindset is, well, maybe if a few of them got tickets, they might be, more apt to actually follow that protocol. And if for some reason they know that they have some sort of emergency in their family that really precludes them getting out to their car, that they contact the police department and say, hey, I know I'm supposed to have my car on the even side, but, due to this set of circumstances, can you please just give me a waiver for that, which, would accommodate somebody who had extenuating circumstances that doesn't allow them to move their car. Because I see our street width is narrowing because it's an inordinate amount of snow. And by the way, Streets and Sand are fabulous. Let me just give a shout out to them. They work really, really hard. And that's what's frustrating, is when I've got cars that don't belong to me, parked in front of my house that, doesn't allow that snowplow to really do the job that they want to do. So that's my thought.
And I appreciate that. Those are some great comments. And I could tell you that over the last 2 days, officers have written over 100 tickets over the last 2 days for cars that were parked in violation of the village code regarding snow removal. It is a challenge. This is probably one of the heaviest snowfalls we've had in quite some time. And I do sympathize with people saying, hey, I can't move my car for whatever reason, dead battery, it's just too dug in for me. But that being said, it makes for a difficult decision from an enforcement perspective. And here's my philosophy. I like to exercise discretion when we get a minor snowfall of 2, 4, 5, 6 inches. That's probably a better shot of getting some discretion where, hey, your vehicle in that amount of snowfall is not going to interfere with our real concern of removing snow. When you get 18 inches of snow, which is, I believe what we were documented as having, at least on one, you got to get your car out of there. And if you can't get it out, you got to call somebody to get it out. And if you get a ticket and you have an extenuating circumstance, we have a procedure for that. And you can go to the administrative adjudication and present your case to the judge, who may find sympathy. But it'd be very hard for me to say this one can park and this one can't. It's just too difficult when you got a window of trying to clear out snow. And we have a village code that was designed to make sure people, adhere to the code. Now, as I said, I'm a firm believer of discretion, but in this particular case where you have a serious snow emergency, people need to move their cars, and it's for safety reasons. We have to get those streets clear, and the public works did work very hard. The police department was out yesterday and today. The focus was obviously our main arteries first, Pratt Avenue, and the IDOT roads, which are primarily plowed through IDOT in the county, but we also assist. But the side streets, if people can't get down their side street and get out to the main artery, it shuts down, it basically shuts down the ability of the residents to get out. And I could tell you the operation of how we run things in Lincolnwood, I think are very reasonable. We try to be accommodating and we want residents to comply. But there's always going to be people that just don't move their car. I could tell you that from my experience in Evanston, and obviously one of the other people who've lived in Evanston know that when they get a snowfall this size, they declare what's called a snow emergency. They sound the sirens and they send out email blasts and text messages, and basically they do the same thing even odd. But if you park your car there, they come in with a fleet of tow trucks and they tow the car, put an expensive ticket on it, pull the car off the block, the plow comes through the block, and the tow truck comes back around and drops the car. Now, we don't have that ability we don't have that built into our code here, nor do I think it's necessary because of the way our footprint is here in the village. But the congestion in Evanston obviously calls for a different approach. I just mentioned that because of just looking at how other towns, as you mentioned, Elmhurst, same thing. Basically, where I live, my car cannot be on the street when the snow falls over 2 inches, so the plows can, once the plows come through,
Yep.
and they do it,
No problem.
no problem, put the car back.
Right.
Chief, I'm going to interrupt you if you don't mind, because I see that Syed has a question, and I want to be sure that we get a chance for a lot of questions. So can I interrupt you?
Yeah, let me just, if I can just finish real quick. I just wanted to mention one thing about our ticketing. So if the plow if the plow already came through a block, and let's say somebody cleaned off their car and moved it, and the plow came through and then they moved the car back, even though technically they're in violation because of the odd even on the side streets, we're not going to ticket that car because the mission was accomplished. They cleaned their car, they moved it, the plow came through, and then they put the car back. They may have put it back before the village code allows for it, but the object was completed. So we, again, in my approach on discretion, they complied, the plow cleared the block, and then they put the car back. It's the cars that didn't move at all, that are uncleaned, not moved, were the ones that were ticketed. So I hope that explains everything.
That's the one, right? And that's the one I had. That's who I have issues with, and they're repeat offenders. So I totally get what you're saying. If you want to flip over to the other side of the street once the street is plowed, I don't care. That at that point, you're right. The job is done. So, and I'd be on board for towing, honestly.
So I wish we had like sometimes it's a necessity, but capacity-wise, it makes it hard.
Right.
So I hope that answered your question.
It did. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Lori. Syed, did you have a question for Chief Parrott?
Yeah, I just have two quick questions for Chief Parrott. First of all, thank you for joining us and keeping our communities safe for everything you do, and for Karen for organizing this event. Quick question I have, one for, as we are talking about the snow plowing and then also about the reporting of a burglary. On the first note, I noticed like when the residents clean the driveway and have it clean so their car can get out and everything, the next thing I noticed, the plow comes in, there piles that snow all over the driveway, they're just blocking the driveway again. So it becomes like a double work and hard to get out. And if there's emergency or something, there's so much hassle for the residents. So I don't know what we can do about that blocking of the driveway when they're cleaning the street.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's probably a little bit, I completely understand it because it happens to me when I clean my driveway. But the issue that comes into play is in between each house, if the plow had to stop and try to just groom each individual snow removal on the street to the house and have to stop and worry about the driveway, it would take too much time and there'd be really no way to properly groom the street and clean it. So you're going to get a little bit of residual snow when the plow comes through, and it's really expected that the residents, you just have to go down and clean the apron along the street. It's an unfortunate thing that has to be done, but I understand it because I have to do it, and it's just kind of one of those things that I accept as a homeowner, that when it snows a lot, I just have to go down there and clean when the plow comes through.
All right, second question I have is, when a resident reports a burglary event at a home or something, is there a follow-up from the police department to the resident? Because I noticed like it goes in a vacuum and sometimes we don't get a follow-up from the.
Well, let me just say that all burglaries are followed up. If it's a theft, it may or may not be followed up if there's no solvability factors. It really depends on the particular case. But so a burglary is something where somebody obviously goes into a residence or a garage and steals something. But a theft would be something that's just stolen from outside, maybe a package theft. Those may or may not be followed up on. We don't follow up on everything. We use a solvability factor. If there's no witness and there's no cameras, and depending on what was taken, there may or may not be a follow-up just because of the type of crime it is, and there's the inability to solve. But burglaries.
The reason I brought it up because I had a breaking into the garage, and it was a bike. A new bike was stolen. Not, the intruder not only came through the garage inside the hallway to get it, but then I had like no follow up on that event. So,
could you do me a favor? I know that we did. There was an arrest made regarding a bike taken from a garage.
But this was about I'm talking about a year and a half to 2 years ago. So I don't know.
Okay. You know what? If you, Mr. Rahman, if you wanted to follow up with me separately, contact my office. I will look into it and get you an answer as to what exactly took place with your incident.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. You're welcome.
And I'll put your email in the chat in a moment so that anybody who wants to reach out to you individually, is that okay with you, Chief?
That would be great. No, email is great. It's a good way to communicate because I can do it even in between some of my meetings.
Okay, I'll put that in the chat in just a moment. Meanwhile, I think Debbie has a question.
Debbie, how are you? I think you're on.
I'm good. I wanted to say thank you so much for being here and for sharing your time with us. It's really great to see you.
Of course.
I do echo what Lori said. On our block on Keating Avenue, there used to be 3 homes and now there's 5 in the area, and it's repeat people that just leave their cars, and it's just so hard. And there's like a speed bump there too. And it creates just such a jam up for the snowplow people and stuff like that. So the fact that you're ticketing, I appreciate that. It's just really frustrating sometimes.
It is. And unfortunately, people prioritize. And, sometimes people legitimately are out of town, which I understand. I mean, you can't predict when the snow's going to fall, especially a heavy one. But and this is one of those instances where we really have to take enforcement action across the board.
Right. My question also was, I want to invest in a camera system. And do you have ideas of what has worked well and what has been useful for the police department too?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I'll just put this caveat out there that I don't specifically recommend any particular brand. I can tell you that we officially partner with Ring because they have a partnership program, and I like their format because they have an easy ability to share videos that are stored in the cloud with law enforcement. So if something were to happen, you can send that video not only to your neighbor, but you can also send it to the police department via the cloud through a messaging system that they have. And it just makes it easier. So if, let's say you work a lot and the officer, the detective that's following up on it, the detective doesn't actually have to physically come to your house to get that. You can share that through a link, and it just makes things just a lot easier for us to obtain the video and get it in a timely fashion. But there are other platforms that allow that to happen. But again, I know we're officially in a partnership with Ring. They just have a format that's just easily useful for law enforcement and frankly to share with you all.
Thank you so much, Chief.
You're welcome, Debbie.
Don't forget those thumbs up, and if you have a question, you can raise your hand, or you can do the one that looks like clapping. So we're talking about safety. There's a few thumbs up. I like to see that. So we're talking about, you mentioned about safety and carjacking. There were some other topics I know that we wanted to be sure to address, but before we move on, are there other safety questions in the group? You know, one of
If
the,
I could,
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was going to say, just, I have a very simple suggestion to a lot of people, and it's just with whether you live in a safe neighborhood or not, or you travel to an unsafe neighborhood. I think in today's environment, we have to just be conscious of our surroundings. And I just tell people, don't be so focused on being on your phone. If you're getting out of a car, know your surroundings and don't leave valuables in your car. Don't leave them visible. If you have to leave them in your car, at least hide them somewhere or put them in a locked trunk or something. And make sure you don't leave your keys in the car and you lock your doors. And if you have motion lights, use motion lights outside. In addition to cameras, those are all great preventative items that you can do to reduce the ability for somebody stealing something. The vast majority of our cars that are taken the doors are unlocked, the car's left running, or just it's unlocked and people go in the car and steal stuff. Very few of our car break-ins are actually physically where they use force and break out a window. Very, very few. So those are just a few things. If you take away the opportunity for somebody to commit a crime, they can't do the crime.
Got it. Thank you. That's really, it's really common sense, but it's so important that we get reminded of that, especially from you. So thank you for that. I think Marcus
I see Marcus.
Yeah,
Yep.
Marcus has a question.
Yeah, quick question, Chief Parrott. With regards to carjacking, having like a homing device on your vehicle, like a low jack system, does that help escalate you guys in terms of helping us get our vehicle back in case of a carjacking?
I can tell you, not only does it help us get the vehicle back and get it back sooner, it also will help us with the ability to probably apprehend the offenders if they flee and we can track it.
Got it. Okay. When we call 911, we just let them know that we have a carjack, low jack on the car. And they can actually check.
Yeah, you should just tell, if you report it, say whether it's it doesn't necessarily have to meet the level of a carjacking, but it could even be just your car gets stolen, whether that's here or you could be somewhere else, anywhere in the country. If that were to happen, you just let the dispatcher know that you have a locating device in the vehicle, and that you're once you give them all the information, that you're going to contact the locating service to try to work on getting a location. So when the officer arrives, you can provide that information in real time.
Got it. Okay.
Chief, I've read, and I would love your opinion about this, and I've heard that one of the most important factors in neighborhood safety is knowing your neighbors and having a sense of community and having each other's phone numbers and things like that. Is there anything, I know at one time we had, what did they call that? Like neighborhood watch. Is there anything that the village or the department is doing to facilitate those relationships? I can tell you myself personally, I've lived here for, my God, since Illinois was a prairie. And I guess I'm not that friendly. I don't know that many people on my block. And I wonder if other people do.
We do have a program. We have a neighborhood watch program. We have an officer that's assigned to coordinate that. We did do a little bit with it in 2020, but honestly, the pandemic has really hindered some of that ability to get people together, to get to know your neighbors. I mean, you could do it virtually like this. It's an option, but it doesn't really, if you don't, it's not like getting together with somebody like it used to be. So we're kind of in this pause of trying to deal with getting to know our neighbors or getting to know other people and hold meetings virtually, which it's an avenue to bring people together, but it's not the best when it comes to the way I look at it as community policing, because getting to know the officer and sitting around and talking and getting those, exchanging information, it's something we want to get to. And I'm hoping we get to it soon with the weather change and hopefully the reduction in COVID cases and, vaccinations. I'm hoping we're getting closer to where we need to be to get back to some sense of normalcy. But I could tell you that Officer Claire Plant is our officer that handles Community Watch and the program. If you want to contact me, Karen, and you're interested in setting something up, I will have her reach out to you. Currently, she's working the midnight shift, but officers do rotate. So it's, you know, I always say a good time to organize, you know, springtime's a great time to get people organized with the summer coming up. So that's a great point. And I want people to know that that resource is out there. The one thing I always mention with Community Watch or if you want to call it a, you know, neighborhood block club, you have to have an organizer, somebody that's willing to be the organizer, and somebody that's kind of also secondary when that organizer is not around. So, and just going and knocking on your neighbor's door if you don't know them and saying, hey, I want to, you know, all I'm doing is trying to organize our neighborhood for safety purposes or whatever it may be. It could be as simple as, you know, hey, my neighbor's out of town. We had a snowfall. Do you think, you know, would you mind maybe seeing if somebody on the, if there's a teenager on the block that wants to earn a couple extra bucks and shovel out my driveway, so when I get back from out of town, I don't have to deal with it. It could be as simple as that. I'm just using that as an example. But there's a lot of people that are willing to help and keep an eye out for neighbors and, you know, check for mail or whether it's, you know, some people, it may not be that easy to stop the mail. I mean, obviously, Mr. Grossman can't even get a hold of the post office. So
right now, we can't get it started.
Yeah, so it's, you know, some people don't like that. I mean, other people, I'll be honest, when I go out of town, you know, we have a neighbor come by, take care of our dogs and collect our mail and bring it in. And it seems like a lot easier to do it that way. But, you know, not everybody has that option. So, but I think those are things that neighbors really appreciate. And you have somebody really checking on the house and checking on the block. And as I said earlier, you know who belongs on your block. And especially once you get to know everybody, you really know who's on your block.
Paula just made a really great suggestion. Maybe we can coordinate with you and have Officer Plant come and do a fireside chat with us and teach us how to get our blocks organized. If each one of us organized our block, that would be a good part of Lincolnwood. We've got 20-something people here.
That's something, yeah, I'm really hoping that we don't have to do a virtual chat. We can do it in person. My preference is that. I'm not saying that we don't have to do it virtually, but it's just something that I think is better for, you know, it's just better community police relations and just better for the neighbors to really get to know each other in person.
Cool, great. Lori, you had another question?
No, I don't have a question. Can I just make a comment? So as the spring rolls around, I mean, I know that the vaccines are coming, but we're still not going to be running around like we normally do. And you know, I've spoken before, we've got a pretty tight-knit group on our block. And part of the reason is that one of us is out in front and just hanging, if you will. And so when neighbors come by, if they're walking their dog or whatever, you know, that encourages conversation. And so it might be a really great time this spring as the weather breaks to actually get that rolling on a block, because people aren't going to, I'm assuming, you know, not going to be traveling and are still more or less homebound. I mean, that was a saving grace for us all the way until it's, you know, until the end of October, honestly. I mean, that was our social network through COVID, is our neighbors. So.
Yeah, and I think with the weather change, you know, the ability for us to try to do stuff outside where there's a little more level of safety, even with, you know, masks and social distancing. I think that may add to the ability to accomplish that.
Great. Any other questions related to safety or block organizing? Chief, we had some questions about diversity in the police department, and I'm not really sure whose question this was or what their intention was, but maybe just a little bit of like the philosophy of the police department, the composition, community relations, whatever part of the police and diversity you would like to address.
Sure. I mean, ever since I came and became the chief of Lincolnwood, I embraced the you know, diversity within the department. Lincolnwood's a diverse community. I'm a firm believer of the police department representing the community that it polices. I know that I can honestly say that, you know, most police chiefs and organizations across this country struggle with, we want to represent, we want to have a diverse workforce. We know that that's advantageous, not only for us to be dealing with the community we represent, but just having that ability in a diverse population to just, everybody coming from different backgrounds, their exposures make you better when dealing with certain situations. So I could tell you that, we have, up until recently, we had, my deputy chief retired to take a job at another department for career advancement. So that, obviously changed our demographic a little bit. We currently have, I'll try to pull up my numbers here, but we have, I believe, 7, in terms of gender demographics, we have 7 female officers. We used to have 8. I also look at how many people are taking our exams and what the demographic breakdown of that is. And that's roughly the same for gender purposes. We have roughly about 30% female taking our police exam and 70% male for people that I have identifiable, they identify themselves as either male or female. Of that, the representation in the police department is exactly that. It's 30% roughly. Like I said, we just lost one, but we were at 33% compared to 66% male. With losing that one, we're down really around 27%. But again, we fluctuate right, just very close to what the amount of the demographic in terms of gender that takes our exams. I would love for more diverse population to take the exams. I look at diversity in terms of ethnicity, race, gender, and also now we look at sexual orientation as diverse population, and I embrace all of that to represent law enforcement. I think that's an important factor because to me, it doesn't matter what a person is. It matters how good they're going to do the job. I want to find the best candidate. It doesn't matter. Not that the other things don't matter because I've dealt and worked with throughout my career people with many different backgrounds. Like I said, whether it's gender, sexual orientation, race, they're exceptional police officers, exceptional. And that's what we want, exceptional police officers. So, but I do want to have a representative workforce. We have 2 officers that are Asian, and we have, I believe it is 3 officers that are Hispanic, and basically we right now I think where our biggest deficiency within the department, if you're looking at traditional demographics with race, I think I would like to see our Asian officer population increase to mirror the community, because our community, based on a 2010 census, I believe is roughly 30% Asian based on 2010 census. I haven't seen the final numbers. We had an officer, again, my deputy chief, who retired and moved on for career advancement, was African American. That represented, Lincolnwood doesn't have a very high population of African Americans, but it is important to me, like I said, to represent each demographic that is represented by residents of the village. So again, recruiting, we try to recruit and embrace that diverse population of officers. But we also have to look at when they take that exam and they go through the testing process, where do they rank? So again, I think right now, if we're looking at mirroring the community, the Asian population of officers to the community, we have the Asian officers, but it's not at the highest level percentage-wise compared to the Asian population that represents Lincolnwood. I hope that answers most of the
It looks like
information.
Edie might have a question there.
Sure.
Go ahead, Edie. You have to unmute, hon.
It's not exactly diversity, but it is about hiring. And I've read about police officers who are dismissed from other police departments, and then they just go to the next town and get a job. And I'm wondering if there's any way that we have of tracking that and not hiring police officers who have been dismissed from other departments.
Well, I can tell you that under my tenure here, we've never done that. There's a process. They have to follow the rules of the Board of Fire and Police Commission for us hiring entry-level officers. They have to pass several steps to be considered for hire. There's 2 levels. Once an officer takes the exam. And if it's an officer that we decide to hire, we have an ability to hire an officer who is an officer at another department. But if an officer was dismissed for poor behavior or rule violations, we will not consider that officer for hire. If that officer was looking to transfer over to Lincolnwood, there's still a regimental process that they have to follow. They have to pass an administrative interview, which is amongst the rank and file of the police department. That's an interview panel. They have to pass an extensive background investigation. They have to pass a psychological exam. They have to pass a polygraph exam. They have to take a medical exam, pass a drug screening, and ultimately also have to be approved on 2 different levels by the Florida Fire and Police Commission.
Sounds good. How does that happen in other police departments? Do they not have all of these kind of tests of who's coming into their departments?
I frankly, I think that it really depends on, I found that most information that is divulged when you find a candidate that maybe doesn't meet the criteria is done through the background investigation. So, but again, there's still employment laws that agencies must follow. We have to make sure that there's still employment law that must be followed, and that there's no, the bigger agencies probably have so many hirings going on where, maybe somebody sneaks through the cracks. But I can tell you that right now, especially with the legislation that they're working on for certifying and decertifying officers, I mean, you still have to be an officer, you have to be certified by the Illinois Training Board in Illinois. Right now, they're working on a process to decertify officers with the new legislation that was passed, which basically would, if an officer was discharged or committed a crime, they would lose their certification, and then they couldn't apply anywhere within the state of Illinois. So that's not been all worked out yet, although that's in past legislation. That's already made it past the House and the Senate. But once that becomes law, they're going to have to work out the parameters in terms of keeping track of that. But I believe that that'll be something that will be much better tracked this year when it comes with that new legislation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on this or closely related topic for Chief Parrott? So can you talk to us a little bit about the role of the social worker? I know we only had one for a couple of minutes recently, but what does the social worker do?
So the social worker is there primarily, it's a police function to deal with victims of crime, and also deal with specifically victims related to domestic violence, but other crime victims of violence. A lot of times victims have to deal with the court system. We want a social worker who's their advocate to look out for the process that they have to go through with the court system. That's first and probably the primary mission of the social worker. Now, they get involved with other things. We have a lot of, obviously, police deal with a lot of families that have mental health issues. That comes about from us responding to calls and domestic disturbances where there may or may not be domestic violence, but there may be issues going on in the home. Those are referred to the social worker. Now, the social worker doesn't perform counseling because a part-time social worker just doesn't have that capacity in terms of time to do that. But what they do have is resources. So what we do is we try to get those types of individuals through the police social worker to get the resources that they need to get the help. So that's kind of one of the functions of the police social worker, is to try to get resources to people that need them. And those can be sometimes very simple and sometimes very expansive to get people help. As we know, mental health issues for the most part can be a lifelong challenge for a lot of families, and trying to make sure that they have the right resources or getting the best resources for them is difficult. And some of it could be that they don't want those resources. Some of it could be that they want them, that they can't afford them. So we try to direct them in the right towards those right resources available, whether it's through the county or through non-for-profits. Some of those resources are maybe related to drug use. where we'll use other agencies that provide services. So that's the primary function of the police social worker. Now, you know that, as we talked earlier, the Angel Fund, where the social worker has extended that position to get families in need the services that are available through the Angel Fund. Currently, our part-time social worker did leave. That our part-time social worker had a full-time job, and I think with things going on, it was too much to handle. Which I could see working a full-time job and then working part-time. You're basically at full-time job's 40 hours plus another 25 as a social worker. Now you're at 65 hours a week. That's a lot of time. And then if they have to put any extra time in at their full-time job, now you're at 70 hours a week probably. So that being said, we're in the process of trying to find a new part-time social worker. In the meantime, we're doing what we've done in the past, and actually this has taken place probably over the last 6-7 years prior to myself even being here. Skokie has a full-time social worker that is working at contracting with us to supplement the needs of our social worker. Now, we have to be obviously careful on how much time, because they can't fulfill the job of the part-time social worker for every case that we have to deal with. So we're a little more selective when it comes to dealing with somebody that we're contracting through Skokie. So the investigation sergeant, Sergeant Namovitz, is spearheading that, and kind of she gets the cases, reviews them, and notifies the Skokie social worker to handle that. And hopefully we'll have a replacement soon.
I have questions, of course, but I think Ray has a question. Let's go with Ray. Hey, Ray.
You say Ray?
I said Ray.
Who, Ray? The social worker, do they get involved when there's neighbor disputes? When the Jones and the Smiths are fighting about something? Next door to each other or down the block?
Mr. Grossman, it's possible. It really depends on the circumstances of the dispute. Some disputes can be very complicated. Some can be take years to develop. But it really depends on the circumstances. If there's a propensity for violence, probably not. It probably exceeds the level of the social worker, but maybe not. So again, it really depends on the circumstances.
So the answer is yes, they can be.
They can be, yes. That's the general answer.
Louise has a question or a comment there.
Yeah, hi. So hi, Chief Parrott. My name is, well, it's Louise Gross, but it's a pseudonym. My married last name is Motel. I don't think we've met. This is a nice way to meet. So thank you for doing this.
My pleasure.
Yeah, this is really informative. But to sort of tie into Ray's question, hooray, Ray, thank you. This is not a setup, but one of the things that our group actually has been talking about in a pretty general way is a sort of neighbor v. neighbor piece. And what happens, I mean, just, Lori mentioned the situation with, parked cars and snow removal. That's sort of one issue. And I understand you have a ticketing capability there, but there's all kinds of stuff that I know you guys probably get calls about, whether it's barking dogs, noisy neighbors, property disputes. Sounds like the social worker is not somebody who generally wades into those things. Does the village have any mechanism for dealing with those in any kind of a mediation or other dispute resolution fashion at this point? Have you looked into it? Because we're thinking about it and we'd like to work with you if it's something that you think would be helpful.
I mean, I'm familiar with the process, and it really depends. I mean, the issue that comes into play is what authority would the group have to do, and would somebody even want to do that? And then if they were, there's so many variables that impact when the neighbors have disputes. Some of them could be cultural, religious, could be just that they don't like each other. Those are the more simpler ones, when people just don't like each other. But if there's deep-rooted issues between neighbors that may take a long time to actually get out, I don't know that that's something that people want to do publicly. Some may, and I don't say that publicly like the whole world's going to find out, but what I mean is people may be reluctant to want to go to an organization to have that. And I don't know what type of binding position a group handling that would have. So it's very difficult. I could tell you that my experience when I was in Evanston, we did have a neighborhood, basically a neighborhood dispute group years ago in Evanston. And they could make recommendations, but it was really more about, you know, people expressing what their frustrations were, but there was no, the group had no binding authority to say that, oh, you got to do this or you got to do that, because they had to have some legal backing behind them. And a lot of times what happens is, from a police perspective, if we have neighbor disputes and it escalates to the point where somebody commits a code violation or breaks the law, we cite them and then it goes before the administrative adjudication. And that's not something we want to do because, frankly, but it may be necessary. You understand what I'm saying? And then you have an administrative law judge who's making the determination, did this neighbor violate the village code by, you know, somebody maybe trespass on their property or cut their tree limbs, or, you know, a lot of disputes. There's many different types of disputes. And I guess my thought process on it's very complicated. I think intent is good. I think your thoughts are good and the intent of trying to have something like that is good. I just don't know the difficulties or the obstacles that a group would have to get to where they need to get to.
Yeah, no, I understand. And this is actually a spoiler alert for everybody who's in my program group. I actually had a conversation today with something called the Center for Conflict Resolution. And apparently they have relationships through the Skokie and Niles police departments. I'm going to find out more about it. This is actually an organization, a 501c3 nonprofit organization that makes their services available to towns to provide that service for neighbor v. neighbor. Because, you know, the thing is, as you've indicated, these things can also escalate, right? So you don't want it to get to the point where there's violence and people are talking about going before administrative law judges. So the idea is to have conversations earlier on. Have you heard about that at all through the other police departments?
I actually am not familiar with that particular organization, but I'm very interested to hear about what their services are. So if you want to share that with me, I'd be more than happy to listen.
I would like to very much. I had a preliminary conversation with the head of this group today. We didn't finish, and I'm talking with her again Tuesday, but it sounds like something worth exploring. So thank you.
I'd be very interested to hear, and then also hear about the cases, or even follow up with some of my colleagues at the other departments to see what kind of cases they're sending their way.
Great, thank you.
So here's
You're welcome.
excuse me for interrupting. Here's another quick commercial for the program committee. If you like what you just heard, be sure to send an email and say that you would like to be part of the program committee. Also, Syed was here, and I think he's had to jump off. But to remind you, you can send us an email if you'd like to be part of the outreach committee as well. We really want to get our neighbors involved in an organizational way. Other questions or comments? Paula.
Well, and speaking of commercials, just a quick note with regard to the Angel Fund. The Angel Fund is a 501c3 that was created by Lincolnwood Together for neighbors in financial crisis. I've put the link up a couple of times. Okay, 6 times. But if you could copy paste it at the end, that would be great. If you 5, 10, or whatever, whatever you can, it would be greatly appreciated. It is helping neighbors in need. We did recently give a donation through the social worker of Aldi food cards. Now's a tough time for a lot of people. So if you have anything that you could direct our way, that would be hugely appreciated. That's the last time from me, I swear. Probably.
But maybe. We'll give you one more, Paula. Thank you. Other questions? I think Chief Parrott's, made himself available. Any kinds of questions that you have for the chief? I
would, and I'd also like to touch upon one other thing that you had on your informational flyer, and that was about the community service officer.
Yes, sir.
So we have a full-time community service officer and we have a part-time community service officer, and I think and I could be wrong, but I think based on the information that I've heard is that there may be a misconception on what that position exactly does. And what the community service officer does, they're a uniformed position. It's a civilian position. It's not a police officer. Although the 2 individuals that work for the Lincolnwood Police Department are retired police officers. And what they do is they manage when there's a vacancy in the crossing guards for the schools, they have to man the crossing guard position. So currently that is been taking place. So when school's in session, the community service officer is out there crossing children both to and from school. So that takes up several parts of the day. They are also tasked with assisting with code enforcement. So we have a code enforcement officer, but they also assist with the code enforcement officer. And then there's any code violations that relate to parking, or if it's potentially, we may have incidents of abandoned autos on the street. They deal with that. They also deal with our maintenance of our vehicles. So any of our vehicles that need to go for maintenance or repairs or outfitting, they do all the transports of the vehicles. They also keep track of all the vehicle. We do have to do vehicle inspections, oil changes, anything that goes on with that. It's their job to shuttle the cars back and forth. They also deal with, as I said, parking. So one of the things that the community service officers have been doing the last couple of days has been dealing with vehicles that are illegally parked related to the snow routes. So they are trying to get vehicles moved that are in violation, that may be snowed in, and they are also writing tickets for vehicles that are in violation. They also deal with traffic studies and parking studies that need to be conducted when, say, an example would be, we may be looking at establishing a residential parking zone. Well, there's certain criteria that we have to have and report to the traffic commission on before it even goes to the village board. The community service officer would be tasked with actually doing that parking study, evaluating how many cars are parked in an area. Are they Lincolnwood residents? Are they not Lincolnwood residents? How long have they been parked there? What times and dates have they been parked there? So some of it's extensive. They also deal with moving the police messenger trailer, putting up digital speed limit signs that we usually use not in wintertime, but they also assist with traffic control on traffic accidents or major traffic issues. So there's a great deal of things that the community service officer does to assist the police department that basically takes away things where we don't really need a sworn police officer to do. So we have a community service officer perform that function. So they kind of offset. They also assist in records, our records bureau, where sometimes, there may be whether it's covering during lunch or, say a records person is sick, we may not have the ability to cover that position because they're absent. So they would fill in for that spot. Again, kind of a multifaceted job description, and they also do, I'll give another example is they do assist with potentially bringing things back and forth between different village departments. So they also perform that. Again, multifaceted, but not really geared towards, although they serve the community, their dedication is not really geared towards like what some people think of as a community service officer, which is maybe sometimes associated with like a crime prevention officer. So I hope that helps explaining the job duties. But they do deal with citizens often regarding complaints regarding parking. So generally when I receive those complaints, I do direct them to the community service officer to try to handle those. They are very familiar with the village code and again, try to get those issues resolved without taking enforcement action.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Chief Parrott? Comments, appreciations? We're just so happy to have this opportunity. I think we're just so lucky.
No, listen, my pleasure. Honestly, I appreciate the thanks, but it's my pleasure. It really is. I think it's good. It's good for us to get to know each other better and any concerns that come up. And I want to try to be able to answer those questions that you may have. And if I don't have the answer, I'll find the answer. So.
And we appreciate that. And I hope you can see on the screen lots of applauding hands. So we're appreciating you very much. I'd also like at this point just to ask everybody to also go to their reactions, if you would, and go to the one all the way, open up the reactions and go to the one all the way to the right. It says ta-da, and it looks like a little confetti thing. Can you put that on your screen for just a moment?
I can try.
Lydia got it.
Oh, there we go.
Let's all do it. It's Louise's birthday today. Happy birthday, Louise. That was your party.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. We got you. Okay. Chief, thank you so much for being here with us and for
I
always
hope
being available.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope I covered everything. You know, I'm trying to think of everything that was on the flyer. I feel like I covered most of it, if not all of it.
I think so. I looked at the flyer, I went down the list. I think you did. It doesn't seem like there were other questions. So
And I just would like to say for the group, you have my email address. Something comes up, follow-up question, or you have, let's say 2 weeks from now, if something happens where you know, have a question for police or need police services or whatever it may be, or just think of a question that you didn't think of right now, just email me. I'll be more than happy to try to, you know, I'll either answer it or I'll get you the answer.
awesome.
That's something that, you know, I value, you know, everybody's input when it comes to this community. So I could, as I think I've shared this with Karen, no matter whatever anybody thinks, the one thing I've found very unique to Lincolnwood, and pretty much I think it's really kind of goes beyond Lincolnwood, but everybody here cares about Lincolnwood. Everybody I've dealt with, no matter who it is, if you're a resident, you care about Lincolnwood and you want the best for Lincolnwood. You want it to be a safe community. You want to have good services. And you want to make sure that Lincolnwood stays safe. And that's important to me. And I think that's a great quality. And that's why Lincolnwood has been such a desired and successful community with not only schools, but just a good place to live, the parks, and, you know, people enjoy Lincolnwood. It's a great town.
Agreed. That's why so many of us have lived here so long. So thank you very, very much. We will call our next meeting of Lincolnwood Together that we'll have. I don't think we've had our February meeting yet, so I will be sure to schedule that and let everybody know. We've got the program committee has already got a meeting set up. We've got a meeting set up for the outreach committee, and upward and onward. Thank you all so much. And don't forget the Angel Fund. Be sure if you can, make a donation. Chief Parrott, it was a pleasure having you.